to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, July 13th, 2015, almost halfway through the month here. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, as always, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick program note, tomorrow in our third hour, Dave Gahary of American Free Press will be our guest on the air talking about the current state of race relations in this country and the very obvious efforts to try and fan up race hatred in both directions for political gain here. Now, before we get into the news, just a quick comment because I've gotten tons and tons of emails about this. Last Friday, we launched the new version of the What Really Happened website. It was based on Drupal 7, and during the course of the weekend, more and more problems kept showing up to the point where this morning we're back on the original version of the site. And if you go to whatreallyhappened.com and it forwards to the new site, you need to empty your browser cache and then you'll be able to see it. So the original site is back on there, and I think I'm just going to scrap Drupal 7 and give it a whirl with Joomla because Drupal 7 was just, it just couldn't be made to work, and I'm getting all these emails from other webmasters saying, yeah, you cannot get it to work. It's just become too junked up, the state of American software. Don't get me started. We'll be here 3 hours talking about why modern American software and Internet communication infrastructure sucks. So, all right, we are hearing sort of mixed signals coming out of Tehran. We're having headlines like at the Washington Times, the Iran nuclear deal is imminent, negotiators say. Meanwhile, of course, all of Israel's whores in the U.S. Congress are out there saying, oh, we gave away too much, Obama conceded too much, we should have taken a hard line. What was really interesting was Fox News over the weekend had a spokesman from the ACLJ who was on the air screaming about how this deal should not be completed until these 4 Americans being held in Iran are released, that should be part of the deal. Now, these 4 Americans are being held for espionage, and it was a setup. When this all happened, these 4 hikers were basically right along the border to Iran, and all the locals told them, do not hike that direction. That is Iran. And we all know that modern cell phones have GPS in them. Hikers can buy dedicated GPS at the hiking store. There was no question these 4 knew they were walking across the border and got arrested to try and create an incident to demonize Iran with. And they've been held in Iran ever since. Now, once the deal is signed, Iran would be smart to release them. But this idea that Iran should release people accused of espionage as part of the deal, that was never part of the deal. And that is the method by which this deal has come under attack, to try and hook onto it things that are irrelevant to the discussion of reassuring the world that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Of course, the people who are out there screaming Iran is building nuclear weapons aren't going to be convinced by anything, because the issue isn't nuclear weapons, it's destroying Iran. Now, the latest word from Iran's foreign minister is the nuclear talks will not end by midnight. Everyone's screaming, oh, Iran has violated another deadline. And the deadlines are arbitrarily created, and it's not Iran who's holding things up. It's all these people coming in from the U.S. Congress and from Israel trying to add things at the last minute, because they don't want this thing to go forward. Now, regional powers are out there saying they want the Iran deal. It's going to be good for all of them. It's going to be good for the region. Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri in Lebanon is saying that an Iranian nuclear deal is going to calm down major conflicts in the Middle East, which, of course, is not what the U.S. foreign policy wants, or Israel. They want the conflict to escalate. Good for business, good for the weapons contractors, good for redrawing map lines. Now, over in Russia, there's a very interesting story that came out of RINF.com, where this Russian politician, Evgeny Fedorov, he's a member of the Duma, is predicting in this video, we have it on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, there is going to be a United States coup d'etat to oust Vladimir Putin. And we know that Putin is aware of this. He has been kicking out all of these non-governmental organizations from Russia that are covert fronts for U.S. overthrows, like USAID and Canvas, who were instrumental in overthrowing the elected government of Kiev. So Putin knows they're gunning for him. Now, over in Ukraine, there's been apparently a major battle where what is being described as Ukraine neo-Nazis shooting out with Kiev forces in Mukachevo. And, of course, what they're trying to do is use the name neo-Nazi to demonize these people who are basically in the eastern Ukrainian republics not wanting to be dragged back to be part of the European Union. And as a matter of fact, there's a story in TASS about how these people in the eastern Ukraine are tearing down all the EU flags and replacing them with their own, what they're calling the right sector nationalist flag. So the Western media is out there saying, ooh, they're neo-Nazis, they're bad, you shouldn't sympathize with them. Nazis become this general label to fling at anybody that you want to justify aggression against. Now, speaking of aggression, NATO is now accusing Russia of aggressive methods of naval intelligence collection. Basically, their complaint is that as NATO sails their warships up to Russia's borders, Russia is coming over to take a look. And as you know, there was a confrontation between Russia and the USS Donald Cook in the Black Sea that went very, very badly for the Donald Cook. And so NATO is out there saying, how dare the Russians come out and look at our warships on their borders. Of course, if Russian warships showed up in waters bordering the U.S. or the NATO nations, NATO and the U.S. would, of course, respect the privacy, right? So it's a classic case of good when we do it to them, bad when they do it to us. And propaganda runs forward. The U.S. is planning to set up a drone base in North Africa in order to attack ISIS in Libya. And, of course, they're not attacking ISIS in Libya. They're attacking the people of Libya for wanting to try and kick out their U.S. puppet ruler. Same thing that's going on in Yemen. Same thing that's going on in Iraq. ISIS is just this scarecrow they've set up. They walk in, set up the scarecrow, says ISIS, ooh, ISIS is there. Kill all the people, blow up the infrastructure, come on in, take that little scarecrow and plant it in another country. That's what they're doing. Now, over in Israel, the police have arrested 3 Jewish youth who are suspected of the arson at the Galilee Church, the Church of the Loaves and Fishes in northern Israel. About a month ago, it was burned down. What was interesting was at the time, the police arrested several Israeli youths and then immediately released them. But this arson attack on the church has provoked a global outcry, and now Shin Bet has announced that a covert investigation has led to the suspects, and they've been arrested. Not sure what, if anything, will happen to them, but that's where they're going. Now, as you probably heard on the SRN news break, prosecutors have indicted Romania's prime minister for wide-ranging corruption. It was the same PR we saw leading up to the coup d'etat against Kiev, and not surprisingly, Victoria Nuland, the queen of the covert coup d'etat, has been in and out of Romania this year. So this looks like another U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat to bring down an elected government and put in a new U.S. puppet ruler. They really put pedal to the metal on this thing because they know the world understands that's what's going on. Now, we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Greek deal and its ramifications. It did not work out well for the people of Greece. And, of course, nobody cared about the people of Greece anyway, but it works out great for the bankers. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get into the Greece situation, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, another one bites the dust in the Ukraine. Defense minister, former advisor, went to Donbass.
Okay.
And remember a month ago or two, the 2 brothers went to Lugansk?
Yeah.
So they're dropping like flies over there. They know it's coming apart.
Well, Ukraine is going to default here sometime in the next couple of weeks, despite all the instantly created money being poured all over it. And everybody is already noticing the difference between the way the money junkies are treating Greece versus the way they're treating Ukraine. And there was even talk that the U.S. might themselves get Poroshenko out of there in order to put in another strongman they think might be able to actually recapture the eastern Ukrainian republics and provoke a war with Russia. But, we just have to sort of keep a close eye on where Victoria Nuland is going, because wherever she's flying to, that's the next hot spot.
You got to follow her cookies.
Yep.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to talk about the economy, how, like a week ago with the Chinese stock market, and we had that glitch. I personally believe that it wasn't a glitch. I think we stopped the bleeding because, you look, China, the majority of the population, it's like 3 to 8% own any stocks. In America, it's 50%. And we have a safety, we got pensions, and then, in China they don't. So you figure, it would hurt us, I think, more than the Chinese, even though it crashed in China.
Well, we're dealing with two overlapping situations here. First of all, China is already out there saying that the sudden plunge in their stock market last week was a deliberate attack on their economy. And it does appear that the interruption in trading on the New York Stock Exchange last week may have been deliberate, because there were a huge number of orders coming in on stocks, which at the beginning of the trading day, there was a memo circulated saying these are problematic stocks and they could cause some real problems. And somebody may have yanked the wire, because when they got the trading up and running again, all those pending orders had been erased. And so they may have been trying to stop a major crash there. And if these stock traders get into their own virtual war around the globe, it could very, very easily spin out of control. Now, I'm not sure 50% of Americans own stocks. I don't think the number's that high. There may be some people who've got like 1 or 2 shares of this or that as part of their 401ks, but they're not really heavily into the market and trading. And I wouldn't say that Americans have pension plans, because more and more Americans who are retiring are all of a sudden finding out their pension plans are not able to deliver the payments that were promised. And they're already changing the laws to say, if the pension doesn't have it, the pensioner is going to have to just eat those losses, and that's just, you got to share the losses here, and the poor are ultimately made to pay for everything that goes on here. So it's not as clear cut as that. And you need to understand that the people of China may be paid less money than we are, but they also pay a lot less in taxes. And so the difference in standards of living isn't as great as you might think. If you look at the major cities like Hong Kong and Beijing, they look to be the same standard of living that you would see in New York or Los Angeles. Yes, there are some very poor parts of China, but then compare those with Appalachia here in the United States, and you realize there's not that great a difference between standards of living in both of our countries.
Well, you look at Shanghai. They said that's the most that's more expensive to live than New York, New Jersey.
Well, that would tell us that the economy in Shanghai at least is doing very well, and it has become a very beautiful city. There's some very daring architecture happening over there in Asia.
Hey, Mike, I'm off topic real quick. I just wanted to know. I know you do computer graphics. What's your take on like the new graphics chips that they got out? I mean, it's amazing what. Coming from Video Toaster,
Well, Video Toaster was a long, long time ago, and I'm not paying that much attention to the board-level hardware. I know I've got a very high-end graphic card in this machine, just in case I actually get an animation customer show up here one day. But it is amazing what the hardware is able to do, and having sort of grown up with the computer animation industry, it is astounding what the small desktops can do that used to take giant mainframes and dedicated frame buffers to do back when I was at Robert Abel and Associates. I mean, it is really astounding how just a single desktop machine can be an entire production company now.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. All right, getting over to Greece. And apparently they had a 17-hour strategy meeting between the money junkies and the Greek government, and they came up with what is being humorously, they think, termed the agreement, and the negotiators for Greece and the Eurozone unanimously agreed on a solution to the Greek crisis. Okay? Now, this deal still has to be approved by the Greek Parliament. Tsipras is saying he can deliver that vote. The result of this deal is no Grexit. Greece remains enslaved to the European Union. And some 15 billion euros worth of Greek assets go out of Greece's control. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on. And they're getting this gigantic bailout coming in over the next 3 years, totaling somewhere between 82 and 86 billion euros in order to keep Greece from leaving the European Union and pivoting to Russia. There is a problem, which is that like all the earlier bailouts, the cash is going to pour into Greece's treasury and then turn right around and go right back out to the banks who hold Greece's debt. There's going to be nothing left over with which to create jobs and industry in Greece to build up the economy, to build up their earning capability, to ever allow full repayment. So all they've really done is kick the can down the road, keep Greece a slave to the EU and part of NATO. And that's it. And the people of Greece are probably getting very angry right about now at what they're seeing as a sellout by Tsipras and the Syriza party. They're already talking about there may even be new elections, and it's going to get ugly. Real quick, phone call before the commercial break. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'll make it quick. Last week when they had stock market glitch, do you think it was a position where the market was in a free fall and the plunge protection team couldn't save it, so they hit the kill button?
It could very well be, because, I mean, this idea, they were trying to blame it on a software upgrade, which you don't do in the middle of the trading day. And I guess they're listening to my show because the next day the story had changed to say it was an overnight software upgrade that didn't manifest the problem until midway through the day, which is not beyond the realm of possibilities. But with this government, you just can't trust anything they're saying, is unfortunately the bottom line. All right, Steve, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. So, welcome back to our show here. Now then, the Eurozone leaders have reached this agreement to rescue Greece, and it's not really a rescue. Basically, Tsipras has caved in to all the demands by the money junkies, exactly the opposite of what he promised the voters of Greece that he would do. In fact, Greece's Reform Minister, George Katrougalos, came out and said, clearly the Europe of austerity has won. And I'm expecting rioting in Greece. There could even be a civil war. Now, earlier we were talking about part of this bailout package, which is not really a bailout, it's just plunging them onto the debt hook a little bit harder, is that Greece has had to turn over control of some of their assets to Europe. And it turns out those assets are airports, airplanes, infrastructure, and possibly the banks themselves. And this is the end result of the money junkie, debt-based economic system, where the people are left with unpayable debts, and the bankers own everything. That's the game. That's what they've been doing. Now, Germany is still not okay with this deal. Pardon me. There's cartoons appearing in the German media, which basically are not only showing that that Germany does not approve of the deal, they don't think it's one-sided enough, but their attitude toward Greece and the Greek people is clearly very negative, very unsympathetic to what they're going through. There's another article that came out over in Global Research. The problem of Greece is not only a tragedy, it is a lie. And they're saying basically Tsipras and the Syriza party have just ignored the mandate of the Greek voters and basically agreed to a raft of repressive, impoverishing measures in return for a bailout that means foreign control and sending a reminder to the world, you will not break free of the private central banks. Over at Op-Ed News, they're saying, we are all Greeks now. And we are. The private central bankers have built this trap to enslave us all. Because that's what private central banking is. It is a method of enslavement. The essence of the banking industry is to keep us all, whether we are nations or individuals, slaves to debt. It's not about money. It's about power. It's bringing back feudalism and serfdom, where the people no longer own the land owns the people. And you cannot live your life without the leave of their lordships to do anything at all. That's what those little plastic cards they're trying to convince you to use instead of cash are all about. You will need the permission of the bankers to buy a newspaper, a jelly donut. That's where this is headed. Now, over at Goldman Sachs, we finally have the name of the person who was involved in this double shuffle flim-flam that got Greece into this debt problem, all the way back with that underhanded deal with Papandreou. Antigone Lodiadus, more widely known as Addie, made a huge amount of money, and so did Goldman Sachs, putting together this currency swap deal that concealed Greece's debt from the EU in order to get the EU to bring Greece in. Well, that may be coming around, because lawyers are beginning to say, this is reported in The Independent, they're saying that Goldman Sachs could be sued by Greece for this underhanded deal that created a huge amount of Greek debt. And let us not forget, in the background there, we have Germany that owes Greece something like 11 billion euros, and it's just simply refusing to pay. I think anybody looking at this situation realizes it's not just, it's not fair, it's not balanced, it's not morally right. It's simply money junkyism on full display, rampant across the globe. Now, Russia is still in there trying to keep things going, trying to keep it calm. They're preparing fuel deliveries to Athens, and they are offering their support to help revive Greece's economy. In other words, Russia and probably BRICS are going to pour money into Greece to create jobs and industry so that the people of Greece can earn the money necessary to get the money junkies to back off just a little tiny bit. And of course, this is not what the money junkies want. They want to eventually own all of Greece. And the people of Greece will be tenants on the nation that once they owned. Happening all over the world. Abraham Lincoln warned it was going to happen here. Once corporations had been legally created, and long before they were even considered persons, Lincoln warned that the money power would work to aggregate itself until the American people turned out to be tenants on the land their forefathers won. Now, as we mentioned, part of this deal is keeping Greece inside NATO. And NATO was very, very concerned about Greece leaving because it would weaken NATO totally and create a serious tactical problem in that part of Europe for a possible confrontation with Russia. I should say probable confrontation with Russia. That's still on the books. Everybody wants to settle all the bank accounts with a big, bloody global war. Unfortunately, the people who want this war are the last ones to actually fight it. We need to change that around, I think. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico is meeting with their creditors. They're hovering at the edge of default. Could knock down the bond prices. Puerto Rico Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla is basically saying he wants a debt restructuring and he wants a moratorium on the bond payments. And this is how the people who sold the credit default swaps against Puerto Rico's debt are going to get out of it. Oh, no, it's not a default. It's just a postponement. They'll pay this debt eventually, 20, 30, 60, 100 years into the future, and therefore we don't have to pay off on the credit default swap because it's technically not a default. They've been doing that an awful lot, and if they keep on doing it, it's going to crash to the derivatives market as a whole. Now, over in the Middle East, there's a strange phenomenon going on there. Most of us are probably thinking that the Middle East, with all of its oil revenues, has a surplus of cash, and up until recently they did. But that recent oil price war against Russia has harmed the economies of our Middle Eastern allies. They're not happy about it at all, because now we're seeing more and more nations in the Middle East becoming net borrowers, falling into the debt trap. Saudi Arabia has issued its first bond issue of $4 billion to cover their budget deficits. That's unheard of until you realize that 11th marble is a very real idea. Because when all of the currency on the planet is loaned into circulation at interest, the debt can never be paid off. Because there's less money than there is debt. Until the debt grows and grows and grows, until it crushes all the systems, and the bankers own everything. Now over in Detroit, they're starting to model shipping container model homes. They're putting up models for people to look at. 640 square foot unit goes for $150,000. $150,000 to live in a shipping crate. That is the face of economic fascism in the United States. We'll be right back. Welcome to our show today. And for the last 15 weeks, the official U.S. government debt has been frozen over at the U.S. Treasury's website. It is frozen just $25 million below the legal debt limit set by Congress. And it's been there for 15 weeks. And if you think the government hasn't borrowed more over the last 15 weeks, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. It's just another example of the government lying to you to convince you everything is okay, along with that 5.6% unemployment number, which we all know is a joke. And at some point they're going to be saying, well, we've got to raise the debt ceiling. No, you don't. What you have to do is stop borrowing money at interest from that private central bank and go back to issuing debt-free money, which the Constitution allows you to do. That's what you need to be doing. That's what all these countries need to be doing. Okay. Now, there's an interesting article over at Op-Ed News, debunking the debased gospel of wealth. The 1% deserve our loot and our thanks. And they're talking about the arrogance of the ultra-rich in this day and age, and they start off by going back to money junkies of an earlier age who, as they got on later in life, would start to give away their fortunes. Andrew Carnegie, who did some of the things I don't agree with, the Carnegie Foundation for Education, but he did establish all those libraries in New York and tried to give back. Today, our money junkies have this common attitude of, I deserve all this money, and I get to keep it all, you should have none, and you should just be glad that I'm here to keep society organized and moving forward. And again, go back and look at any addict you have ever known. Alcohol, tobacco, coke, meth, pills, whatever they're on. And remember all the little fantasy convolutions they come up with to justify why their addiction is a good thing. And you'll see people who are really addicted to substances, they decorate it to make it look like it's a good thing. Wet bars in the living room, jeweled cases for whatever. We're seeing exactly the same thing with the money junkies. We need to recognize addiction to money for its own sake is a psychological illness. And it is destroying our civilization. Now, here's an article over at Paul the Paper Bear at WordPress.com. The 11th marble the banksters claim that society owes them has grown to the size of the rock that killed off the dinosaurs. Sounds vaguely familiar, but it's basically an article coming on out and talking about, how this system is inherently unstable and it's unbalanced, and it's designed to be that way to bias the flow of wealth up to the very, very top. Now, people like to talk about an economic pyramid. Okay, so let's start by visualizing a giant pyramid made out of coins. And the people up at the top, they've got a big chunk of it, but the majority of the wealth is still down at that base holding it up. And it's shared by all the working people. So individually they don't have as much as the people at the top, but the aggregate is they have a lot of it. Over time, we have seen that pyramid start to narrow at the base until it becomes looking more like an obelisk as the coins are piled up higher and higher toward the top. And now it's starting to assume an inverted pyramid shape. And you know how unstable that's going to be. And now it's all now balancing on just a few coins at the very bottom, and the money junkies are coming down saying, we need those few coins. We all know what's going to happen when they yank those, too. That's a good metaphor for what's going on. For an economy to work and function, the wealth has to flow at all levels of society into all necessary sectors of investment to keep everything going. And as the politicians and the money junkies suck the wealth out of the top, there has to be a mechanism to recycle it back down to the bottom so that ordinary working people can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries to pour that money back into the bottom of the economy and start the cycle all over again. That's the part that's gone missing as the money junkies buy themselves more and more political power. They want the flow to be one way. It goes up to the top and they get all these tax shelters and tax havens and all the rest of it. And they want the working people to pay for everything, including all the taxes, which would be great if there were jobs, and there aren't. It's like Jeb Bush last week out there saying the economy would be fine if Americans just get used to working longer hours. Most Americans who are working are already working longer hours. The rest of them, 93 million strong, can't find a job at all. And I hope Trump gets onto that. I mean, Trump is already out there causing a ruckus by talking about all these aspects of life in the United States that the rest of the politicians don't want to touch. It's not politically correct to talk about illegal immigrant crime. It's not politically correct to talk about how the earth is actually getting colder. It's not politically correct to talk about how unstable and imbalanced the economy has become and how corrupt the government is. It's not politically correct. We're going to talk about, gay rights and abortion and all this other stuff. Now, it gets even worse than that, and this is going to be coming here to the United States of America. Over in Spain, it's 1984. And they passed some new laws which went into effect the 1st of this month that I'm sure wherever Franco wound up in the afterlife, he is laughing his head off right now to see Spain plunged back into an iron-fisted dictatorship. These are some of the new laws in Spain. You cannot photograph security personnel and post the media on social media. Can't post the images on social media. It's a 30,000 euro fine. It is now a crime to tweet the location of a protest. It's considered an act of terrorism because you're inciting other people to commit the crime of protesting. Snowden-like whistleblowing against the government is now declared an act of terrorism. Visiting something considered a terrorist website, even for scholarly purposes, is now an act of terrorism. Can't make any jokes about the royal family. And you can't approach members of the government or local authorities with complaints anymore. It's now a criminal offense. If your home has become so polluted that life is now at risk there, you can't do anything about it. Greenpeace or similar protests are now finable anywhere from 601 euros up to 30,000 euros. Spontaneous protests outside Parliament are now illegal. Showing a lack of respect to officers of the law carries a fine of 600 euros. digital protests, writing anything online that could disturb the peace is now a crime. And, of course, the danger there is what disturbs the peace is open to interpretation. I'm sure that probably a lot of the stuff on my website would qualify for that, making people unhappy with the central bank or the government. And they're trying to figure out some way they can bring that here to the United States of America. That's how much under threat all of our freedoms are right now. We are descending into that dystopian tyranny that so many science fiction writers warned us about, whether it was Aldous Huxley or George Orwell or even George Lucas, THX 1138. We're just about there. And it's time to get very angry about what is being done to your country, your planet, in the name of greed. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Now then, we're talking about the very obvious rush to tyranny and dictatorship all over the globe. And I'm going to share a story with you about just how controlling the control freaks can be. And for somebody who's worked in the film industry for as many years as I did, this is not new. In fact, if you go over to our COINTELPRO page, there's an article specifically about the history of government interference in the entertainment industry, not just to blacklist people who were thinking double plus ungood thoughts, but going on in and changing scripts and basically turning all of Hollywood into a propaganda machine for the U.S. and Israeli governments. So I'm looking at this article over here in the Mirror, over in UK, where a lot of the new blockbuster movies are being and have been censored by the U.S. military for raising ideas and issues that they don't think you should be aware of. And so there are these people from the Pentagon, military chiefs, are out there in Hollywood, literally forcing directors to rewrite scripts if the content is deemed inappropriate. And that this includes Iron Man, Terminator Salvation, Transformers, King Kong, and Superman, Man of Steel. They're all being tinkered with to make sure that double plus ungood ideas are not in there. It's probably the reason there's so many remakes. Anything that's original going to come along is too dangerous. They're even remaking Vacation. Remember the original with Chevy Chase? It was a big hit. Now they're making a new one. That's because Hollywood has kicked out all the people capable of a truly creative original thought, because such people think outside the box. They're not politically correct. Mea culpa maxima. Now then, down in Florida, there was a 4,500 participant, 8-mile-long convoy of trucks, cars, motorcycles, driving down the road, all flying the Stars and Bars, which is popularly assumed to be the flag of the Confederate States of America, even though, as it turns out, it never actually was. It's just a flag that Hollywood picked to always associate with the Confederacy. And apparently, protesters against the Confederate flag fired 6 shots at the convoy, but nobody was hit. Now, over in Maryland, they're saying that the state song of Maryland has to be changed because it was written back in 1861 by a gentleman named James Ryder Randall, who was accused of having Confederate sympathies, and we can't have anything in this country that reminds people that there was once a time when people were unhappy with the government. That's just not politically correct anymore. Very interesting article over in Investment Watch blog. It's raising a very valid point. If the Confederate flag has to come down, then so does the LGBT rainbow flag. And this is actually an issue because apparently the U.S. Air Force is allowing the rainbow version of the U.S. flag at their Arizona base, and it prompted complaints. And the commanding officer came out and said, It's got the general shape and the stripes and the stars, and it can stay. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are offended by that. Now, I don't agree with that, but it's a reality. Some people are offended by that rainbow flag because of their personal beliefs. But that flag will stay, and the flag of the Confederacy is being demonized. We're seeing the politically correct crowd just go on the warpath here. Now, there's another article over here in Mediaite.com. Black conservative group defends Cosby against appalling release of court documents. And it's a group called Project 21. And they're saying there was no real reason to release the court documents from this 2005 case in which Cosby had admitted he got quaaludes to give to women he wanted to have sex with. Now, this does happen on a regular basis in real life. I know it's not politically correct to say so, but back when I was single, I lost count of the number of times girls would say, I'll go to bed with you if you can get me blah. I had a girl offer to go to bed with me in exchange for a crew shirt from Star Trek the Motion Picture. And I got her the shirt, and she went to bed with me. And I know all the feminists are going to scream and yell about how I should have just given her the shirt anyway. She made the offer. That's a fact of life. Guys who want sex will go along with requests from girls willing to offer sex in exchange for something. And drugs are a big part of it. That's a fact of life, and you might as well deal with it. Now, I don't agree with what Cosby did, but he didn't force the woman. She asked. Cosby is just the latest victim of the let's find someone to bash in the corporate media for being un-PC so we don't have to report on the wars and the economy in an election season. Same reason behind this whole Confederate flag pseudo-controversy. And we are creating a society in which the accomplishments of an entire lifetime can be set aside and forgotten over a single instance of not living one's life by somebody else's expectation. What Cosby did in the time and place he did it was accepted behavior socially. But they want to erase all of his accomplishments. And I was a huge fan of Cosby when I was young. To Russell, my brother, whom I slept with. Amazing. If you've never heard that album. And they're still trying to fan up all of this race hatred back and forth. And there's a very unfortunate story over in ABC 7 Chicago. And the reason I'm reporting this is because it is very obvious. The corporate media has been obsessing about white on black crime, but it's not politically correct to report when blacks commit crimes against white. Obviously, ABC decided to be un-PC, and they're talking about this woman who was driving near the University of Chicago campus with her kids. And all of a sudden, she's surrounded by a crowd of black people using racial slurs and saying that this woman did not belong in their neighborhood because she was white. And they kicked the vehicle, shook it, pounded on it, dented it. The kids were traumatized in the back of the vehicle. You don't cure racism by being racist in reverse. Racism in reverse is still racism, period. And I'm appalled at how many people are getting suckered into this by a government that perpetuates its power with these divide and conquer games. So cut it out. Don't be a fool. What was it Malcolm X used to say about that tax stamp on the liquor bottle? That's the white man's tax stamp. Well, for those black people who were beating up on that car, that's the white man's covert operation that you're taking part in. You're doing exactly what they want. Now, Donald Trump is out on the campaign trail, and some people are saying that he's just out there to make sure Rand Paul doesn't get the nomination. He might succeed. He's leading the polls because he's the one candidate out there talking about what's really going on. And he's out there upping the ante on the immigration issue, saying that the reason this drug kingpin escaped from a maximum security prison is he was let go by corrupt Mexican officials. And there's no secret that Mexico's government is totally corrupted by drug money. So, for that matter, is the United States. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Donald Trump, who is the only candidate out there talking about the real world and not just going along with the politically correct issues of the day, like the Confederate flag and so forth and so on. He's out doing a speech in Las Vegas, and he's taking on everybody. Hillary for her lying, a dishonest corporate media, topic near and dear to my own heart. And he's even saying the GOP has got problems, which is true for the GOP and for the Democrats. And I hate to admit it, but I'm really starting to like this guy. And no, he's not going to win the presidency. They're going to give him the Ron Paul treatment. But at the very least, he's going to get in and mix things up and force these PC politicians, these hired salespeople for the corporate power, to have to actually address the issues that are really affecting our nation. So we're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, that's not really my number one issue, but just remind, when you say Trump, you don't think he can win. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, he's got his own money that he can run on. I think he can and probably will win if he goes all the way with this. He is hitting a chord. I didn't think I'd ever like Trump, but I'm ready to vote for him right now if he ran.
There's no way they'll let him near. They're going to give him the Ron Paul treatment. And if that doesn't work, they'll give him the Robert Kennedy treatment.
Well, yeah, he's got. If I was him, I'd hire my own security too.
Robert Kennedy had his own security.
Yeah, but I mean, I would hire really top-notch people. I'd hire, the best of the best if I had it with him, like ex-special forces that I knew were on the right side, not that, working for the New World Order or the globalists. But
unfortunately, the problem is when you're a politician, you have to appear in public, and when you're in public, you are vulnerable, and that's the reality. And, like I said, I'm in agreement with you. I'm liking the fact that this guy's out there raising the real issues that affect all of our lives. But I'm expecting, we're already seeing the corporate media give him the Ron Paul treatment, and try and ridicule him and smear about, he's saying all Mexicans are rapists and stuff, which is not what he said. They're putting words in his mouth.
Of course not.
But if they can't keep him out of the primaries, if it looks like remember, Robert Kennedy was assassinated after he won that last primary that guaranteed he was going to get the nomination. They were waiting to see if maybe he would lose, and if he'd lost, he'd still be alive today. And as soon as he won that last one, boom. They took him out.
Yeah, well, like I said, if I was him, I'd get the best possible security people I could. The other thing I wanted to bring up to you is, as far as Putin and there's a story out now by Paul Joseph Watson. The Russian Parliament member Evgeny Fedorov claims that Russian oligarchs are negotiations with top American corporations in the White House to foment an AstroTurk revolution and lead to the ouster of President Vladimir Putin and the collapse of the Russian Federation in 2 years. They also say that they have pictures, they have proof. Russian hackers have provided proof that some of those ISIS photos of them cutting people's heads off are fake. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you think we're going to, I can't see Putin letting this go on. He's got to do something. He's already starting to crack down on all these non-governmental organizations like,
he's already kicked USAID out of Russia. For funding the opposition. And so he knows what's coming and he's taking steps. He's trying to be low-key about it. And, this could fail. Right now, the U.S. is batting 500 on these overthrow operations since the end of World War II. So it's not a guarantee when Victoria Nuland goes into a country that it's just going to fall over and be a U.S. puppet. I think Ukraine is a good example of one of these things having failed with disastrous after effects. Now, I want to make a comment, though, about that video supposedly showing the faking of an ISIS video that's linked to McCain. Frankly, I have doubts about that. Yes, it presents what we all expect to see, but that's the essence of a really good hoax. And I'm concerned that this video was put out there to trip up the independent media, that everybody's going to put it on there and say, McCain's tied in with the faking of ISIS, and then whoever made that comes forward and say, no, we were making it as part of a commercial, and, you know, and ha, look at the independent media, how foolish they all were. That's what it feels like to me.
Okay, the other thing is, but as far as the sanctions go, if I was Putin, what I would do is I'd cut off all oil, all gas, and everything else to Europe, period. I say, you want to play hardball? We'll play hardball until you lift those sanctions, period. You'll freeze, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, see, that's what Europe and the U.S. are looking for, is for Putin to do anything hardball, and then they're going to say, ooh, Putin's the aggressor, Putin's the one who's being unreasonable, Putin's the bad guy. And Putin is too smart to give them that opening, to give them that opportunity. Well,
if they really just want to destroy the world, I mean, you know, that's the way it is. But we got to wise up in this country and find and understand what these people are about. And that brings me to another point. The guy in South Carolina who shot those people at the church.
Yeah. Now
it comes out that he got that gun. He was not given it as a birthday present. He had a criminal record and he still got by the FBI. Supposedly got by the FBI. If that doesn't show again that this was some kind of a false flag, I believe what happened is the FBI came up to the guy. You know, they didn't say they were FBI. They would say they either some kind of Klansman.
It's an undercover informant. Yeah, we see this happen. This is a repeating pattern.
They might have even had a couple of South Africans, you know, contractors come up and thought, because this guy seemed to be infatuated with South Africa and Rhodesia. Maybe even had a couple of South Africans. We're
not sure about that. It looks those patches look like they were photoshopped onto the picture. The photo of him in the Confederate flag was real, but the patches they don't look right. In that image here. And we just linked to an article from last year talking about how U.S. government agents were directly involved in all these high-profile U.S. so-called terror plots, going in with informants and setting these people up. And it looks like this guy at South Carolina was more of the same. Somebody, FBI informant, gave him the gun, juiced him up on all these medications that he was on, you know, and sent him in. And remember, the witnesses in the church said he appeared to really be struggling with whether or not he wanted to do this before he opened fire. And then, of course, at the very end, he tried to commit suicide, but he'd run out of ammunition.
A lot of people don't realize that this, you know, these experiments, mind experiments that CIA was doing back in the 70s, a lot of people say, that's nonsense. They can't do anything like that. Nonsense. They can do plenty of stuff like that. I mean, you know, people got to understand, there's evil going on in this world, in this country. We are taken over. We don't have a government anymore. We have a government of globalist entities. I don't even know if they're human or not anymore. I'll be honest with you. It makes me think about David Icke, what he says. It's probably silly, but, you know, I don't know. I really wonder whether some of these people are human. They're so evil. And another thing, too, is we got to support Wolfgang Halbig about Sandy Hook.
And also Sandy Hook, yeah, we've had that. Listen, Mark, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got 2 more callers waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you just as soon as we come back from these commercial words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Scott Walker has now thrown his hat into the ring, running for president in 2016. And remember, this was the guy who came down hard on all those police and teachers' unions when the pension funds got defunded by the meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud on Wall Street. I don't care what he says now. He's obviously not a friend of the common people. So we can write him off already. All right, back to the phones here. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. A couple things. First, real quick about Trump. I'm glad to hear him raising some of the, you know, politically incorrect issues, and he's obviously keying into, you know, people's concerns. However, I'm not so sure he qualifies as a Republican. I mean, in the past, supposedly, he's come out in favor of single payer, you know, health care, which is code speak for socialized medicine, and I don't think that quite fits the Republican profile. He's also been a backer, supposedly a financial backer of Hillary in times past. So, like, I think it's great for him to raise these issues, but I'm concerned that he's just going to, you know, sort of further fragment the Republican Party. You know, when you look at him, along with this ridiculously fragmented field of candidates, it just seems like the Republicans are going to self-destruct so as to clear the way for Hillary, who's got Teflon status no matter what she does wrong.
Well, first of all, I argue with that Teflon status because apparently there's a move to try and get Joe Biden into the campaign next year because they're looking at Hillary not being able to make it between now and Election Day without some of these scandals blowing up. And there is a lot of stuff in her history that we're going to be bringing up, like Chinese water torture, drip, 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 drip. In fact, I saw this interesting cartoon the other day about Hillary trying to crate up all of her scandals, and they know what's going on because they had 2 feet sticking out from under the pile of boxes labeled Vince Foster. So she's not Teflon. In fact, she's becoming she's becoming the Velcro candidate. So let's look at that. Now, hang on, Glenn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me respond to what you've already said. Now, with regard to Trump, if the goal of getting Trump in there was to fragment the GOP, it's having the opposite effect because according to the latest polls, the GOP is beginning to gel around Trump. Now, as far as his financially supporting Hillary in the past, he is a businessman, and like most businessmen, he probably was supporting both candidates going into every election so that he had the ear of whoever it was who won. That's become a standard business practice. If you go to all these Wall Street firms and these financial players, of which Donald Trump was one, they always contribute to both candidates ahead of the election because they want to basically bypass the will of the voters. And so I'm not surprised that he's donated to Hillary in the past, and he's probably donated to Hillary's opponent as well. So that's a null factor, okay? And again, while I don't think he's going to win, I'm sure he's going to get the Ron Paul treatment. I think Trump is very good for this nation right now, specifically because he is standing up and talking about things that really do affect our life. The illegal immigration, the problems with Obamacare, the untrustworthiness of Hillary, and he's hitting a nerve with the American voter right now. And I'm sure he's making, the GOP leadership is already very worried about him. And certainly Hillary's worried about him. And this is a good thing because the presidency shouldn't be a dynastic office that is simply a hereditary office handed off between 2 dynastic families. And I'm sorry, I don't want to see a Bush or a Clinton in the White House yet again because both times we've had either a Clinton or a Bush in the White House before, it's been a disaster. Right.
I hope you're right about this. Biden has foot and mouth disease, though I don't think they're going to let him. He's influential as a CFR member and all that, but they've, tried to keep ride herd on him a little bit to try and keep him away from saying stupid things in the press.
No, I will agree. I will agree with that, but he's not coming into the race with this huge history of political corruption and dishonesty attached to him the way Hillary does. And Hillary's campaign managers are out there saying they're already defensive. They're having to keep the candidate away from the corporate media because Hillary's treatment of the corporate media, especially that stunt with the rope, they're now hostile to her. And that is a major setback for any campaign.
Right. The other thing I was going to bring up is the Vacation movie remake you referred to.
Yeah.
I saw a commercial on TV for that shows the Griswolds, bathing, thinking they're going bathing in a hot spring, a mineral spring, and it being this, outdoor pool of raw sewage.
Yeah, I saw that commercial too. And
that's pathetically disgusting. And the idea that's not slapstick, that's not funny, that is just unbelievably disgusting.
I have no intentions of seeing this movie. Even if I could get Time Warner Oceanic's on-demand system to work, which it hasn't for a week now, I would definitely not see that movie.
Yeah, we're supposed to think that that's like something that could happen with a white middle-class nuclear family,
All right, well, listen, I got to let you go here. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And we're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there, all things considered.
Yeah, you do a good job overall. I gotta admit, you're very steady and very consistent. I don't know what to say. I just feel frustrated. I see where this Lois Lerner and all these emails and phony 30 hard drives crashed, and then you look at China and them that really is amazing to me is how the United States is kind of hinting that China was behind this security breach with the recently with the stock market, with the New York Stock Exchange, and the UAL and the whatever, and it's known that we are spying on every country. It's just amazing to me that.
It's good when we do it, and it's bad when China does it. It's another one of these hypocritical double standards we see coming out of the propaganda, that it's okay for us to be going into other people's countries against their will and overthrowing them and spying on them and everything, but how dare China do it to us? And I don't think China had anything to do with this. It's just another excuse to go out and bash China. And by the way, whoever it was who broke into the Office of Personnel Management got past a security system far more secure than Hillary Clinton's email server. And I note that nobody in the corporate media is bringing up that possibility that her server was compromised.
Exactly. And you look at our top cop, this Eric Holder, going back to what is that, Covington and whatever, Burling, the ones that were really that were behind
he's done his job. He protected them from prosecution, and they're going to show their gratitude by giving them this big, cushy, well-paying job. I mean, unfortunately, that's how the revolving door of Washington, D.C. and Wall Street works.
$77 million a year.
Brian Williams is going to be jealous. He only gets $8 million a year for lying to the American people.
I don't know. Thanks for letting me vent, Michael. I don't know how you handle it, because it is so corrupt. It's so in your face that American people got to be so freaking stupid not to see this. All they got to do is turn on their computer and read something else besides the phony crap that.
They are. The numbers are showing that the majority of Americans are now coming here to the Internet to find out what's going on. Viewership of the corporate media is at all-time record lows. That's why they're trying to find some way they can silence the independent media. Because if they can't lie to the public with impunity, they can't continue to rule. Because they have ruled with lies so long, they don't know any other way to run a government. They're really blind to that. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mo. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton. Last week, CNN's Brianna Keilar managed to get the first televised Hillary Clinton interview since Hillary announced her candidacy. And there's something very weird about that. I'm a candidate, no interviews. That's unheard of. And on State of the Union Sunday morning, Keilar said she was surprised that Hillary Clinton was so defiant regarding what they're calling her trust deficit. And Keilar was saying, I was surprised that she didn't show a little more contrition. I'm not. I'm not at all. Politicians as a class are narcissistic and unable to admit even to themselves that they are not perfect. Hillary fits that pattern even more than Bill or Barack Obama. In her own mind, she is always right, no matter how wrong she actually is. That's a classic hallmark of narcissistic personality disorder, and that is a dangerous mental trait for someone who wants the keys to the nuclear weapons. The curse of all political power is that it attracts the very people who should never be allowed to have it. That's been known for centuries, which is why when the Founding Fathers set up this country, they set it up so that power and authority were diffused across the land to the people, the states. The central federal government was broken into 3 parts to keep watch on each other. Because Thomas Jefferson understood when power becomes concentrated, bad things happen, which is what's going on right now. Now, here's an article over at the Daily Bell that calls it like it really is. FBI Director Comey is a maniac. Now, he is out there screaming and crying, just like David Cameron is doing in Britain right now, that strong encryption has to be banned. We cannot have it. We must have encryption that the government can look into at any time in order to fight criminals and terrorists. And Comey is out there saying, I'm really not a maniac, but my job is to try and keep people safe. In universal strong encryption, I see something that is with us already and growing every day that will inexorably affect my ability to do that job. This is a quote out of the National Journal. Now, this is, of course, a joke, and I'm sure that FBI Director Comey knows this, and if he doesn't, he should. Any ban on strong encryption is going to be about as effective as a ban on guns. The law-abiding citizens will do without, and do without the protections of strong encryption or firearms in the home. The real criminals and terrorists can always get guns, and they can easily create their own methods of encryption the government cannot break. We proved that. On this website, we issued 6 encryption challenges. Not one of them was solved. And the NSA was well motivated to try and break the codes in order to discourage the idea that people can create their own codes in encryption. And that was the reason we did that exercise, to show it's possible. Now, Comey wants to ban you, the law-abiding citizen, from using strong encryption so the government can steal your business secrets, which they have been caught doing, go on fishing expeditions for civil forfeiture opportunities or blackmail material, keep you scared into silence about what's going on. We're watching everything that you do online. And, of course, whack off to naked pictures of your spouses and children, which Edward Snowden confirms they are doing. Now, speaking of whacking off to naked pictures of children, there's a very interesting article over in hangthebankers.com. The royal family of Great Britain is apparently not being given immunity for the investigation in this growing child sex inquiry. And Justice Lowell Goddard, the New Zealand judge chairing the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, is saying, yeah, they're going to have to give evidence if the evidence leads to them. This appears to be Britain's equivalent of the Franklin scandal here in the United States of America, which involved the Boys Town orphanage and reached all the way up to the Bush White House itself. And I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with all of this stuff. If the people who seek these positions of power are narcissistic sociopaths, then maybe just abusing little kiddies is just part of the process, part of the symptomology, if you will. Maybe it's just a thrill of getting away with something that is so shocking and evil and vile. I can do this because I'm the prince, or the princess, or the queen, or the king, or the president, or whatever. But it does seem to be emerging that this is actually a common behavior of people in positions of extreme wealth and power. And that's a warning sign that we're not dealing with normal people. They're driven by their mental illness to seek great wealth for its own sake, power for its own sake. And I want to draw that line here. I don't have a problem with people who get rich. Okay, it's how they do it that we need to pay attention to. People like James Cameron or George Lucas or Steven Spielberg or Steve Jobs, who make movies or build computers we want to buy and get rich that way. That's what capitalism is supposed to be about. And we should admire and wish to emulate people like that. I'm talking about the money junkies who game the system to become insanely rich without returning anything of substantive value to society. Those are the people who are a problem. And it seems like, yeah, there's definitely symptoms of mental illness in these people. Narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathy. If not, plus the molestation, whatever. Psychopaths in power, that's a bad, bad, bad sign here. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers, which I'm enjoying my little VIC-20. I just got the instruction manuals for it, and it harkens back to a time when computers were easy to understand and easy to use. And after going through 3 months of 15-hour days trying to get the new What Really Happened website up and running, only to have it eat itself over the weekend, has been a very depressing experience, and I'm probably going to restart from scratch with Joomla to try and get around it. All these layers that communicate back and forth, and it really is not set up to be easy to work on, and I imagine the reason for that, along with the shifting of Drupal away from community blogging to e-commerce. It's designed to basically put it in the hands of businesses. And when I was building the new website, I got no end of emails from people who offered to set up my whole new website for me for only $15,000, which obviously I don't have. Apparently, yet another security flaw has been found in the Flash Shockwave player. In fact, 2 more that allow people to take over computers remotely, and one of them has already been exploited by criminals to infect machines. And I want to know, why are people still using Flash? Flash was invented back in the days of 1200 baud modems to allow complex graphics on remote machines based on the Flash language. And you don't need that anymore with broadband. We're now up to 300 megabits per second here on Hawaii. They finally caught up with the rest of the country. You don't need Flash. I am sick and tired. No matter what browser I am using, all day long I see Shockwave player has crashed. Please send a crash report. And I send the crash report and nothing gets done. We don't allow Shockwave at my website. Some of the advertisers use it. That's their problem. But we will not allow Shockwave at whatreallyhappened.com. Because we got burned by an advertiser long ago. Why are people still using this? How can it be this popular when it's crashing all the time? It is a known security problem, and it's not necessary in the days of high-speed broadband. I'm going to take a break for the news. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3 here. And we're talking about computers, the state-of-the-art, as it were, which I have just recently personally experienced a lot of what's gone wrong with software development in the United States. We've made systems that are just so complex and interlocked, we don't really know how to control them any longer. And we've seen this model where software companies will put something out with all kinds of known problems, and they just wait for people to complain, and fix the really bad ones and ignore the rest of them because they're in a rush to come out with the new whiz-bang version 5 years from now. That's the new business model. Every 5 years you will buy a new computer and all new software, because that's what makes these people rich here. Meanwhile, of course, I've got this Commodore VIC-20. It is 35 years old and still running. So don't tell me they can't build machinery that lasts. Anyway, interesting article over here in phosphorus.com regarding some of the business practices of the Oracle Corporation and Larry Ellison. And basically it's coming out saying that they're using some very questionable pressuring techniques to force people onto their cloud server. And basically saying that anybody using Oracle software to run the business needs to be running audits to make sure they're in compliance with various and sundry this or that requirements. Because you don't want to be out of compliance. And you don't have to worry about audits and compliance if you're running on the cloud. The new model for computing in the future, they're actually trying to drag us back to the mainframe model of the 1970s, where the computers are inside some corporation's building, and your personal electronic device is just a terminal into whatever they're selling you. They're trying to go back to that. They're trying to basically argue against actual computers in your home. You don't need a computer in your house. We'll do all your computing and data storage for you for a monthly fee. And the gist of this article is there are a lot of people who are having problems with cloud services. There have been several well-publicized disasters where everybody's data just vanishes. Like so much else in the computer industry, it's been deployed for sale before it's really ready to go. But if the computer industry can't actually write good software, they don't need to. That end-user license agreement says, hey, we don't guarantee anything. You just have to accept it. And they use politics and pressure to close the deal. And I think a good example of that would be the Obamacare website. Looks just as good as the new What Really Happened website did. Runs just as well. The only difference is I didn't spend $750 million making this disaster. And I'm going to back off, empty the directories, and start all over again with Joomla. Now, speaking of disasters, after this recent debacle between the F-35 and the F-16, it seems like interest in this program is starting to wane all over the world. And we're looking at this article over here in the Fiscal Times. After flight test failure, F-35 could be demoted by the new defense chief. And the Department of Defense was out there saying they were going to need 2,400 combat F-35s, plus an additional 14 development aircraft to deter and fight adversaries like China. But on Thursday, General Joseph Dunford, the Marine Corps commander, who's been nominated by Obama to become the next chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that the F-35 development and purchasing plan is now under review. They're having second thoughts about spending any more money on this boondoggle. $1 trillion so far. And they came up with a piece of junk. And the reasons why the F-35 was an overpriced piece of junk is exactly the same reasons almost everything we buy in this country, everything we make in this country is an overpriced piece of junk. They put features on it to sell it, more features, more features, more features. And they don't build it to last or be reliable. We can't even make a car with a reliable ignition switch anymore. But it's got built-in whiz-bang electronic Bluetooth Wi-Fi thingies. And they're not selling any of those either. I mean, look at some of those car commercials out there. Probably, if you're like me, you don't have enough money to buy a new car, so you're tuning out the car commercials. But you ought to pay attention and look at the lease prices on some of these cars. They can't move the product. It's amazing. Now, John Oliver, on Last Week Tonight, and I'm a big fan of the show, by the way, did a segment on how sports teams are ripping off the American people. And he basically launched into his tirade, citing a report from 2012, saying that there is $12 billion in taxpayer money spent on the 51 new facilities opened between 2000 and 2010. And he's asking why. Sports teams are big business. They have wealthy owners. They've got lots of money. Why do they need the taxpayers to build the stadiums? 2 years ago, Detroit got approved to spend more than $280 million in taxpayer money for a new arena for the Red Wings, 6 days after the city filed for bankruptcy. Even though the Red Wings owner is Mike Ilitch, the founder of Little Caesars Pizza, who's worth an estimated $5.1 billion. Why isn't he building his own stadium? And it's a valid point to raise. You have these ultra rich people want to be out there with their sports teams and say, my team is better than your team, and have a really good time. And they're sticking the taxpayers with the money, or with the bill rather, for all of these stadiums. Why? It doesn't really make any sense. The taxpayers are investing the money in the stadium, and the taxpayers don't get much benefit back from it because all the money goes to the teams and their owners, and the TV contracts and everything. So let's talk a little bit about human-caused global warming, because there's been a recent development. Let's start off first with some news. The U.S. Midwest is having its coldest 3 years on record ever. Forget about going out and saying, oh, we got a hot temperature here today and we got this over here for this day. Averaging it all out to get the general trend, to get the climate, the U.S. Midwest is having its coldest 3 years on record. The Northeast U.S. is having their third coldest year on record. The coldest since 1917. Summer snowstorm hit California's eastern Sierra. Shanghai recorded the lowest average July temperature in 142 years. There's been a huge increase in the oldest, thickest Arctic ice since 2011. Remember, Al Gore said this last summer, a year ago, the Arctic would be completely ice-free. And he was completely wrong. Heavy midsummer snowfall blankets Vorkuta, northern Russia. And as I mentioned briefly on Friday's show, that gigantic snow pile in Boston from last winter is still there. One more month and it's going to qualify as a glacier. We're going to take a break for commercials. When we come back, more about global warming and how finally, there's a crack in the propaganda. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get back to human-caused global warming, a member just put up this story over at whatreallyhappened.com. Jaguar has just had to recall one of their cars. Okay, the Land Rover, the Range Rover and Range Rover Sport SUVs. 65,000 of these had to be recalled because of a software bug that unlocks the car doors without notifying the drivers, making it easy for thieves to come along and steal the car. Our technology has become decadent, which is why it's breaking out of our control. All right, getting on back to human-caused global warming. Down below the equator, it is, of course, midwinter, and it's a bad one. And we are seeing that it is a record-breaking winter so far all over Australia and New Zealand. They're setting cold records down there. Queensland got its first snow in 2 years. Gisborne battles snow, power cuts. South Canterbury temperature coldest recorded in New Zealand for 20 years. Gisborne snowfall heaviest for 30 years. Remember back in March 20th, 2000, the Independent said snowfalls are now a thing of the past because of human-caused global warming. They're calling it the coldest snap in 5 years to hit Australia, snow and hail. And still the carbon Nazis are out there trying to figure out some way they can protect their funding, or at least their reputation here. This is reported in the Daily Mail. NASA, which stands for Never a Straight Answer, is trying to revive one of the carbon Nazi talking points from about 4 years ago, saying that the reason we're not seeing the heat caused by human-caused global warming is it's hiding in the deep ocean. Yes, the surface of the ocean is cooling, but down deep it's getting warmer and warmer, and it's all your fault. Now, whoever wrote this article either does not know science or does not think you know science, because there's a little phenomenon in physics called convection, which is that warm fluids will rise, warm gases will rise, and the colder ones will sink down because of the change in density. There is no mechanism by which you can have warm water held in the depths of the ocean underneath a cold surface. It doesn't work. In fact, over on the Big Island, there was a pilot project that was exploiting the very cold deep ocean water as a cooling resource to make air conditioning more efficient for buildings. And there was even an experiment to try and use the temperature differential between the surface of the ocean and the much colder water down at the bottom to generate electricity. In theory, it worked. In practicality, it wasn't generating enough power to pencil out. But once again, they're back to this idea about human-caused global warming is real. You're not seeing the heat. We're getting all the snow and ice because the heat is hiding in the bottom of the ocean. And it's complete, utter nonsense. Whoever wrote this knows they're lying. And they're hoping that you are all graduates of Common Core, which doesn't actually teach you anything about science or logic or thinking, but only to believe what you're told to believe by authority figures. We'll tell you this: warm water hides in the bottom of the ocean. The test says, does warm water hide in the bottom of the ocean? You click that and you get an A. That's how the brainwashing gets done. And there's an article also in the Daily Mail. Climate change deniers are conspiracy theorists, and they're damaging the public debate on global warming. How dare you not believe, as we say. Now, the whole idea of debate, the definition of a debate is opposing points of view are made public so the public can decide. Apparently, the Carbonazzi's idea of a debate is Al Gore makes a statement and everybody shuts up. In fact, we have a photo taken outside one of Al Gore's appearances with a sign reminding reporters that no questions will be allowed. You will just sit there, hear his presentation, take your handouts, and go. Speaking of conspiracy theories about global warming, over at Discovery, they're now claiming that the global warming is the cause of colony collapse disorder among the bees. Forget about pesticides or GMO pollen, which is proven to harm benign insect species. Oh no, it's all global warming, and it's all your fault again. Well, there is now a break in the consensus, which was never valid anyway. Science is not consensus. Consensus is not science. Consensus is politics. We have been saying ever since this cooling trend began that you have to look at the sun. Solar activity, the number of sunspots, appears to be in a decline. And finally, the orthodox science establishment is finally starting to acknowledge that. Over at Armstrong Economics, they have an article, The Maunder Minimum Petri Dish of Political Change. And he's out there saying the global warming pretend scientists are desperately trying to keep their funding. He's also commenting on this latest claim that the heat is hiding in the bottom of the ocean. And now we start seeing these other articles. This is also in the Daily Mail. Is a mini ice age on the way? Scientists warn the sun will go to sleep in 2030 and cause temperatures to plummet. And they're saying that basically we're heading into a new Maunder minimum, which even caused the Thames River in London to freeze over. They used to have the ice fair on winters between 1646 and 1715. During winter, the river would be totally froze over. They'd go over out there with their ice skates and their booths, and they'd just have a fine old time. Over in Science Alert, they're saying the same thing. A mini ice age is coming in the next 15 years. There's a new model predicting solar cycles more accurately than before, and it's taking into account the indications of longer solar cycles than the 11 and 22-year cycles we're already familiar with. And they're saying, yes, we seem to be heading into a serious major decline in solar activity, and that's going to mean a mini ice age here on the planet. Another article over here in Aletho News. Disappearing sunspots may signal end to global warming. Well, global warming actually ended about 13 years ago. They're just sort of getting up to speed on this. And they're out there saying, as the sunspot numbers decline, the Earth will cool. Gee, you think? Who's been telling you that for like a couple of years now, 3-4 years now? Once again, whatreallyhappened.com is ahead of the trend. I don't like being part of the trend. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And finishing up here on human-caused global warming. Down in New South Wales, near Sydney, they're having the biggest snowstorm since 2007. Now, apparently the Australian Navy is now backing off from their announced plans to purchase the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So everybody's cooling it on this boondoggle. Now then, as a reference point, we have been talking about the fact that there are some 92, 93 million Americans willing and able to work who cannot find a job. If the U.S. government had taken that $1 trillion put into this piece of junk aircraft and used it for job creation, they could have hired every single out-of-work American. That is how the military spending has distorted our economy. We're going to let 92 million Americans go without work here because we've got this brand new whiz-bang airplane with software that will not work and guns that will not fire that can't outfly an F-16 from the 1970s. A little bit of perspective there about just how much military spending costs this country. Because all those billions and trillions that go into the Pentagon, it doesn't just appear from thin air. It has to be taken away from some other part of this nation, which is why the roads are crumbling, the rails are rusty, the bridges are collapsing, schools and hospitals are closing. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's exactly what's been going on. Now, apparently, there was a lawsuit over in St. Louis regarding cancer patients who'd been given cancer from PCBs, specifically lymphohematopoietic cancer, and it went to court, and Monsanto got off the hook by arguing that the PCBs were not produced by Monsanto itself, but by a subsidiary. That's the new insulation. Oh, we own that subsidiary. We don't know what they were doing. We're not responsible. And the jury apparently agreed. Now, there's an alarming trend here in the U.S., and that is the rising use of antipsychotic medication among teens and young adults. Prescriptions for boys are outpacing girls during elementary, high school, and college years. Here's what's going on. These kids are being prescribed antipsychotic medication. This is real, serious, mind-warping medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a made-up disease to sell pills. And here's what's alarming. These drugs are not approved for treating ADHD. But they're very profitable for big pharmaceutical corporations. Roughly 74 million children under 18 in the U.S. are being given some kind of psychiatric medication. Hugely profitable. That's the new business model. They can't be bothered making medications for sick people. There aren't enough sick people. And sick people will die and sue for malpractice. So the model is sell medicine to perfectly healthy people. And when it makes them sick, sell them some more. Now over at governmentslaves.info, they're reporting on a survey, 68% of all doctors in this country think GMOs should be labeled. And they should be. Now, there's been another scandal involving the so-called safety tests for GMOs. Now, this was a study conducted by researchers from the University of Caen in France. It's going to be published in the journal PLOS ONE coming up, basically showing that the original studies for GMO safety were rigged by giving both groups of rats the same food contaminated with Roundup and GMOs. It was a complete fraud. And they gave both animals Roundup and GMOs and said there's no medical difference between them. It must be safe. Now, the fact that they engaged in fraud tells you up front they knew there is an issue, but we've got to come up with test results that will let us market this stuff around the world. And the goal appears to be to give U.S. corporations like Monsanto monopolistic control over global food production, which is very dangerous. If everybody has to go to Monsanto to buy GMO seeds for next year's crop, and Monsanto makes a mistake, and they have in the past, you could see an extinction level event. Look what happened in India with the BT cotton. Now there's another story coming out of Mint Press News, how the offers of financial aid to El Salvador here in the U.S. back in 2013 included a requirement that the government authorize the importation and sale of Monsanto GMO seeds to the local farmers. And this was in contradiction to existing law that was intended to favor locally produced seeds for farmers. And so with the U.S. financial aid came in the requirement, you will accept our GMO seeds. Now, for those of you who, like me, are astronomy buffs, tomorrow is going to be an important day. The New Horizons probe is approaching the planet Pluto. It's 1 day away, and we're going to get our first close look at Pluto and its moon Charon. And apparently there are now 3 additional moons they've discovered with this probe. And it's almost like the end of an era in planetary exploration, because I was born in an age where all we knew of the sky is what we saw with our eyes and telescopes. You know, Sputnik went up into space when I was a little tiny kid. And since then we've seen satellites go first to the moon, then the outer planets. Pluto's the last one. Until we can get to the next star, that's it. Everything else is just refinement. And it will be very, very exciting. And back when I was an astronomer, obviously with a backyard telescope, I've looked at all the planets except for Pluto. I had to use a large observatory scope, but I made a point of looking at it as I collected the entire set. I've seen all the planets. And yes, I know Pluto isn't considered a planet any longer, but I'm one of those old school people who was raised to think of Pluto as a planet, and by golly, it still is. Now, over on Mars, the rover Opportunity, remember that one? Sort of went there before Curiosity, and it's still out there running. It's an amazing triumph for technology. Apparently, the internal flash memory has started to fail, which is rather amazing. Flash memory tends to be stable. They've now reprogrammed the computer to keep everything in the RAM, and Opportunity is still out there, tooling on around. It's not unlike the Viking mission, which when Viking landed on Mars in 1976, they weren't expecting it to last longer than 256 images. And, of course, it just kept going and going and going, and there was funding for an additional extended mission and had to rewrite all the software to handle all the additional images and everything. But every once in a while, you get one that just will not quit. And Opportunity is definitely a major triumph. And congratulations to everybody who built and launched and controlled that one. Okay, now, as you're probably aware, we talked last week about this doctor who was telling healthy patients they had cancer, selling them treatments, and made millions of bucks. There's been an update on that case. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Monday. And we're talking about this doctor up in Detroit, Michigan, who over many years of his career intentionally misdiagnosed patients as having cancer, even though they were actually perfectly healthy. Then selling them unnecessary chemotherapy treatment, radiation, other drugs, from which he made millions of dollars from their health insurance. And of course, chemotherapy is not something that goes away. It permanently harms you, so does radiation. A lot of these patients he did this to have suffered permanent harm. And he was okay with this because it's making money. Seems to be a consistent attitude through the entire medical industrial complex. Well, he's been sentenced to 45 years in prison, which I don't think is anywhere near enough. But it is a reminder that a stethoscope around the neck does not an honest person make. And there's a big problem with doctors and other practitioners who are literally encouraged by the big pharmaceutical companies to sell their medications. They get trips to conferences, they get gifts, free vacations, whatever, other inducements. It's all about pushing product, not making people well. Now, over at MoneyCNN.com, there's a very alarming article how the federal government wants all Medicare doctors to foster, meaning start or initiate, end-of-life planning discussions with the elderly. Now, back in 2009, when Republicans were talking about this idea that Obamacare was coming with death panels, they were ridiculed and smeared by the media. And here we are. Medicare will pay doctors additional funds to have 30-minute meetings with patients and family members to discuss what are politely called advanced directives. So we've reached the stage where if you can make money for the system, you will be allowed to live, and if you're too old and sick or crippled to be a profit center, well, it's time to just gently suggest that you go on to the great beyond. By the way, a little statistic for all of you out there on the vaccine discussion. Vaccines kill more people than sharks, alligators, bears, snakes, and spiders combined. So instead of Sharknado, I think we need Vaccine-nado as the next horror movie over on the Sci-Fi Channel. Oh, it's flying needles. They're coming after us. They're going to stick us with aluminum and mercury and peanut oil and whatever else is in there. And by the way, have you noticed all these commercials for drugs to treat psoriasis, which is where your immune system has gone out of whack? And I did a little bit of digging about the incidence of psoriasis. And like autism, it seems to have exploded with the advent of all of this over-vaccination that's going on out there. Our civilization is going in a bad, bad direction, unfortunately. Alrighty, now the Dutch Supreme Court ruled a week ago that the leader of a Jewish Hasidic sect wanted in Israel for alleged indecent assault of women and girls can be extradited back to Israel. They want him back. And I'm mentioning this only for those who claim that I only pick on the Catholic child molesters, because they're out there. Speaking of Catholics and Christians, the governor of Oklahoma has defied a court order and says the stone monument with the Ten Commandments will remain in front of the government building. And of course the argument is now going to be whose version of the Ten Commandments should go on there, because there are actually multiple versions of the Ten Commandments. Now, you've probably been hearing about Uber. This is this sort of community-sourced transportation where you use the Uber application and you find somebody that'll give you a ride. And, of course, it's come under attack by the taxi companies because it's cutting into their business, and it's now under attack by the government because if the taxi cab companies aren't making money, the government can't get their piece of the action with taxes. And out in Los Angeles, the police are now using a very dirty trick. Okay, they'll have these pretty girls run up to somebody that they know is an Uber driver and say, I'm in a hurry, I didn't use the Uber app, but, you know, please drive me a couple of blocks, I have to get to an emergency. And the instant the driver says yes, he gets arrested for being a bandit cab driver, which is somebody who is paid for rides without funneling the cash through Uber, and in turn the state's taxing authorities. In other words, they're setting up a sting to turn law-abiding people into criminals, because it's too much trouble to go out and actually find a real criminal. This is entrapment. Somebody's got to take this to court and say, this is clearly entrapment. The driver would not have committed this crime if he'd not been lured into it by this sexy undercover policewoman. And by the way, speaking about the police, remember the officer who beat Kelly Thomas to death out in Fullerton back in 2011? Was one of the two cops acquitted for that. They just saw these two cops beat the guy to a pulp. He died, and it got acquitted in the trial. Well, he is now retired, and he's getting $40,000 a year in an annual pension from the taxpayer. So that's the reward for beating a homeless person to death. Get to sit at home, $40,000 a year, no jail time. There is no justice left in this country, unfortunately. There really isn't. Anyway, we're coming up here to the top of the show, and looking around, it does seem like not just the United States, but the world as a whole is headed in a very, very dangerous direction. Our economies have been destabilized by private central banking. Our infrastructure has been crippled by shortcuts to a fast buck. And the NSA, far from making our nation secure, has left our infrastructure wide open. And regardless of whoever did that hack over at the Office of Personnel Management, the NSA is to blame because they were supposed to prevent it, not provide a back door to allow it to happen. And speaking of the NSA, I have a question which is still without an answer. With all this talk about Hillary Rodham Clinton's emails on her private server and Lois Lerner's lost IRS emails, doesn't the NSA have them? They've been telling us that that's what they're doing, copying off all this stuff, but it's rather interesting that for the politically powerful, the NSA isn't going to say anything. Which is a reminder, they're not spying on the real criminals and the real terrorists. They're only spying on the law-abiding citizen. If you're a big enough criminal, they don't want to have anything to do with you. And it really is a joke because Hillary Clinton's private email server was not secure. Security experts were looking at it before it was taken down and wiped and said it was wide open. It was using an incorrect security certificate that could be gotten past. It had less security than the OPM. It's got less security than I have. And Hillary Rodham Clinton, despite her claims to the contrary, had classified documents on that server. And everyone's making a big stink about personnel records being hacked by somebody that they claim is China. And nobody wants to talk about who was it who may have broken into Hillary Rodham Clinton's server and stolen classified U.S. secrets. And we'll never know because she's wiped all the hard drives on that machine. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. Then I got to get back to work deciding what I'm going to do for the new What Really Happened website. I think I'm going to just start from scratch and go with Joomla. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay skeptical, stay informed. Go ahead and get angry. It's time now. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.